Well, good afternoon, everyone. This is Todd Bales again, coming to you from my spacious home office here in San Antonio, Texas. For those who don't know, I am the QAPC for DET2, and you may be in the DET2 footprint here in San Antonio, or you may be watching at Patrick Air Force Base, or perhaps up at Scott Air Force Base or Tinker Air Force Base. But wherever you're watching, I'm glad that you've arrived, and the purpose of these little short sessions is just to get some information in your hands. And for those who have done the class in the past and those who haven't, you know that I will give you 3 words during the time that we spend together, and then all you got to do is just email me at todd.bales@us.af.mil, and I will issue you a certificate for the time that we spend together, so that you can put that up against your continuing ongoing core requirement, whether it's 8 credit hours in 2 years, or whether it is in 3 years rather, or 16 hours. So whatever it is, you can use my credits towards that. I've talked to several other QAPCs, and they're honoring my courses as well, so please feel free to go ahead and use those, and I'll get you a certificate over. So today's topic is going to be COR Surveillance. And as we come to the end of the year, and as I start looking at my CPars reports, I'm noticing we have a lot of CPars reports coming due. And so I want to make sure that you are equipped to go ahead and respond to those CPars reports in the best way possible, that you're positioned, and so that we don't have any surprises when we get to that point in the discussion. So what I did here is I actually opened up the DoD COR manual, which is all the way back in 2012, but it has some really good information about how cores should be operating, and they have a nice section on surveillance, and I just want to kind of relay some of the key thoughts that I saw in that process as it was outlined in the COR manual, the DoD COR manual, to you in this format right here. You'll notice that if you've watched the other 2 videos, I'm going to try to improve on the technology. I'm learning some things about video that I never knew before, and one of the joys, I guess, from working from home here in August during the COVID pandemic. So with that said, let's start off as we talk about COR Surveillance and talk about the key documents that you need to have as part of your arsenal to go ahead and do a proper COR Surveillance. And I actually have 3 or 4, depending on how you count it, listed here. The first one is your SOO, Statement of Objectives, your SOW, Statement of Work, or your PWS, your Performance Work Statement. You want to have those, whichever one is applicable to you, available, so that you know exactly what the contractor is providing to the government. It's not what you think it is, it's not what the contracting officer thinks it is, it's what the actual document says. And if the document says they will provide 15 pages, and you feel as the COR that perhaps they should be providing 20 pages in a report. Again, we'll go back to that base document, the PWS, and that will determine exactly what is going to be delivered to the government. Anything beyond that, they can certainly do that, but we cannot require them to do that without having the CO, the contracting officer, actually make a change to the contract and say, you know, we need to provide 20 pages now and not 15. So that's the first document that you need to have. Be really familiar with that. You should always have the latest copy of the PWS in your file so that you can look it up when issues arise when you're surveilling a contract. And so that's pretty straightforward. You also want to make sure that you have and I got these grouped together, so whether it's 3 or 4, I don't know. But you also want to have, along with your PWS, the conformed copy of the contract. I've run into cores over the years who have actually had a copy of the contract, which was maybe the initial copy, and you know they were on modification number 15, and they were still surveilling the contract based on the original contract. And of course, as each modification comes out, my hope is your contracting officer is sending that to you, you're putting that in your file, and so that you're always surveilling based on the very, very latest PWS and the latest contract. Something really simple that could change is your period of performance. You know, we have a government delay. Perhaps during COVID, we had expected a service to happen from this date to this date, and now it has to be shifted to the right because the contractors don't have access to the building. But your contract would tell you that. That would tell you your POP. That would tell you exactly when the contractor should be doing performance for the work. And so we have that listed. The second key document that you need to have is your QASP, your Quality Assurance Surveillance Plan. And that's really key because the whole document talks about what you're going to be doing as a COR, but what you'll find is in that services summary section towards the back, it tells you exactly the things that you're going to surveil, the minimum things that you're going to surveil, as well as the frequency and what the standard is for surveilling those items. So you definitely want to have that handy and have a real good working knowledge. Now, as I mentioned a minute ago, when it says QASP, and let's say you had 5 items in your services summary, that doesn't bind you to those 5 areas. You can certainly surveil anything that you find in the PWS. In the services summary, though, it does show you the 5 or 4 or 6, whatever most important things that the government needs to get out of that contract. And it also tells you, as I said, the frequency. You may say, I'm going to surveil every Tuesday. Well, if that's what the QASP says, and that's what everyone has agreed to, then every Tuesday you need to be surveilling the contractor and the work that they're performing. And again, if you don't know what's in the services summary, there's no way that you as the COR can go ahead and surveil in conformance with the services summary. So you want to make sure you have the latest QASP. And I will say as well that QASPs can change. They're living documents. If we make a change in the PWS, in the SAL, in those documents we have to make a modification. But if we make a modification to the QASP, a change to the QASP, we are able, just as within the government, to go ahead and make that change in a modification as required. So if you find, as we go through this session, and then as you look at your contract, your specific contract, if you need to make a change to the way you're surveilling and the QASP says you're going to do one thing, you think you should do another, talk to your contracting officer and see if we can't make that change. Talk to your QAPC, see if that change can't be made in that document so that you're going to actually surveil in accordance with the QASP. So you'll want to have the PWS, the contract, the QASP, and you'll also want to have your COR appointment letter. Now, for those who are actually in the PI system, and I'm actually speaking to several, at least in my group here in San Antonio, there are several that don't get into the PI system because of security reasons. But for those who do, your COR appointment letter is actually found there. And you should be really, you should have that front and center. You can pull it up anytime in PI and see exactly what the contracting officer has given you as far as responsibilities. And there's actually a series of boxes on that appointment letter, and they're checked. And it'll tell you exactly what you, as the COR, are responsible for. You may or may not be responsible for spot, for example, and that box will be checked or not checked. And so you just need to pull that up and so you know exactly what you're going to, the boundaries that you're going to have as a contracting officer representative of COR in these cases. So those are the key documents that you're going to need to go ahead and surveil a contract properly. And I think that's all pretty straightforward. Let me give you one of the first magic words. The first magic word is Nike. Nike, like the god of war, I believe is who Nike was. Nike. So let me talk about the next topic if I can, and it's communicating with a contracting officer. And in the DoD manual it says, and I'm going to read this directly, the COR must notify the contracting officer in a timely manner, orally or in writing. Orally and in writing. That's really important because I think maybe we do one or the other as CORs, but the manual says you're going to notify them orally, pick up the phone, walk down to their desk, tell them what's going on, and in writing. So you're going to write back on an email, say, hey, we spoke about this problem, this issue, this concern that we have, and this is what you told me to do as far as resolution. So you want to make sure as the COR that you're having both oral and written communications with your contracting officer. And it says if the contractor is not performing well. So the COR has a responsibility to inform the contracting officer what's going on. Having been a contracting officer myself for a number of years now, it's very frustrating to find out 6 months later that we had a problem and it was never brought to my attention, because if it wasn't brought to my attention, I didn't get a chance to take care of it. And I find that contractors in general like to work, they like to get paid, and when they get a call from the contracting officer, they tend to do exactly what they need to do to make the situation right, and they're actually very fast at making that situation right. And that's always been my approach. If we have a problem, we get on the phone, we get the COR in there, maybe we get the leads for the contractor, we get the principal for the contractor in the same room, we talk about what the issue is, and I can't remember a time where we didn't get a resolution to what the problem was, so that the government is satisfied that the contract is being fulfilled. So with that said, make sure that you're talking both in writing and orally to your contracting officer as a COR, so that they know what's going on. And this is that famous foot stomp that we see in every single QASP related discussion that we have. Only the contracting officer can make changes to the contract. So as a COR, you want to just be very careful what you're saying, obviously, and you're going to defer to the contracting officer to make any changes, any modifications to the contract. Do not, as the COR, obligate the government to a change. You know, wouldn't it be nice if we had blinking lights in the ceiling? Even something as innocuous as that comment can cause a change order, and then the government's going to get paid for these blinking lights. Contractors are not doing it out of the goodness of their hearts. They're trying to make a profit, and again, they want to be very pleasing to the government. So if the COR comes and says we want blinking lights in the ceiling, they're probably going to put blinking lights in the ceiling because that's what they want to do, so they can charge us. So be careful with that. And I'll say one final thing about this. If you're having discussions back and forth with a contracting officer in writing, or when you do get it in writing, make sure you put those in your contracting, your COR files, so that you have a record of this discussion. Because again, I don't want to have any CORs that work with my team out there making changes, nor do I want them to be perceived as having made a change if they've had a discussion, in fact, with the contracting officer. So I think that's pretty straightforward. So please, please, please communicate with your contracting officer as soon as you know that there's a problem or an issue or a concern, so that they can go ahead and do that. They can go ahead and jump into the fray and call a meeting and make sure that we have some resolution up front. So the manual actually talks about 3, and I've added one additional area that gives us an indication that we have some issue. And the first one is a contractor progress report. And many of you have contractor progress reports. Most of you have contractor progress reports called out in your contracts. And all you have to do is go back to the procedurals found within your contract. And those are typically maybe even your last pages of your contract. And those procedurals call out exactly what you're going to be given from the contractor and how often. So you may have a procedural every quarter, and it's 10 pages. You may have a procedural every week that's, you know, a 1-page report. That has been determined as part of the contracting process. The contractor has bid on that requirement and is responsible for making sure that they fulfill that requirement and give us those reports. So even if things are going fantastic in your contract, be sure that you are staying on top of your procedurals. Make sure that you're reviewing every procedural that comes in so that you can review it and then report back any problems, because procedurals will tell us oftentimes that we have a problem. We may have a production schedule that we're trying to meet in a cost type contract, and in their procedural they'll say they're 3 weeks behind in their process. Well, 3 weeks may be acceptable, but it may not, depending on, you know, what the material is that's being produced. And if it's a problem for the government that they're 3 weeks behind, again, you're going to jump in and talk to your contracting officer, and you'll go ahead and try to find some resolution if there is resolution. There may not be, but you at least want to get in there and get going so that we can talk to the contractor. And remember, the contractor can always give consideration. So if they're 3 weeks late, and that's costing the government $30,000 for being 3 weeks late, well, perhaps we're going to take $30,000 off of their bill. Or perhaps the contractor is going to give us $30,000 in consideration in another way. The cameras that they were building didn't have eye flaps before. Now they have eye flaps because that's the consideration they're giving us, which the contracting officer has determined to be of value to the government, equal to what was lost by the 3-week delay. Totally a hypothetical situation, but that's just an example of what you could find out there. So The number one indicator of issues is your contractor progress reports, and just make sure that you check them out and discuss any ambiguities with your contracting officer as well as your contractor. And I feel perfectly comfortable, and you want to talk to your contracting officer about this, but as your QAPC, to say, hey, yeah, give them a call. Pick up the phone, walk down the hallway to the program manager for the contractor and ask the questions, why is this 3 weeks late? So that you have an understanding. That's part of your job, to figure out what's going on, and so that you can give the contracting officer the entire picture when you go to his or her desk. All right, the second way you have indication of issues is they're just not meeting the performance that's under the contract. You're doing your monthly, your weekly, your daily surveillance, whatever it happens to be, and we typically use that janitor example, but let's say every Tuesday, one of the things that janitor is supposed to do under the service contract is empty the trash, and you walk around Tuesday afternoon and the trash bins are all just overflowing with trash. Well, that would be an indication that we have a problem. And perhaps on that one surveillance, their personnel were sick that day and they didn't get a chance to do it, but they were going to do it on Wednesday because they had to bring somebody in. But let's say it's every Tuesday we have a problem. Okay, so that's the time that we have an indication something's going on in the contract. We want to get the contracting officer involved. You're going to make note of it, and then we'll move forward and find out what's going on so we can correct the situation. The third way is customer complaints, and this is a good one. Again, janitorial, you'll hear complaints that the restrooms aren't clean, maybe in food service that a row of hot meals was not put out like it was supposed to have been. You'll hear those customer complaints, and then you will go ahead and act on those complaints with the contracting officer. And the fourth one, it wasn't in the manual, but I think it's important. You may have special knowledge as the COR of environmental issues, and I've listed just a couple examples here. First one, pandemic. I know it's a big surprise for everybody, but perhaps the contractor can't do their job because there's a pandemic raging and they can't get any employees to come out to do the work that you have under the contract. And perhaps you're not letting them in the building because that's what has happened. You need to take that into consideration. We have natural disasters. I know just last year we had a flood down in Florida, and the base was closed because of the flood. We just had a hurricane hit the East Coast last week, I think it was. And in that, they had to do some closings because they lost electricity. So you want to take those things into consideration. You could have civil unrest. Gosh, I'm just hitting on all these today, aren't I? All these things that we've seen out there. Perhaps your contractors can't get to the gate because there's civil unrest in the streets. It certainly could happen. You want to make sure that that could indicate an issue. And again, you want to get back to your contracting officer, and that may be an acceptable delay, or maybe not acceptable, but a delay that we can understand and work with the contractor to resolve. And the final thing I have here, just as an example, is a natural resource shortage. And when we have issues with, if we're trying to get materials in, and all of a sudden they say titanium is no longer available because the mines have closed in wherever the titanium mines are, that might be another thing that we want to talk to the contracting officer about. I know the contracting officer certainly, most likely, isn't a titanium expert, but perhaps you are as the COR, and you can explain the situation, and then we can work with the contractor to come up with a solution that's equitable for everyone involved. If the contract says you will deliver this by December 31st, and yet there's no titanium in the world to be had because of a raging pandemic, well, perhaps that's going to cause our periods of performance to shift a little bit, and we want to talk about that. Or maybe we're going to substitute for titanium. Maybe it's aluminum instead of titanium, and maybe that's acceptable to the government, maybe it's not, but that's a discussion that we all need to have. So let's talk about assessing performance, and this really gets down to the meat of what we're talking about here today. I want you as CORs to make a great assessment of what's going on with the contractor, and there's some things you should consider because you have the primary responsibility, don't you, to make sure that the government is getting what the government has bought, whether it's a supply or a service. I think one of the classes I went to, they were talking about red cars, and they were red Ferraris, so the government has bought red Ferraris, and you go, oh, that's really fantastic. I think red Ferraris are good for us. And of course, as the COR, you're going to get one of those too. So, this is great. But if you look at the contract, it actually says we're supposed to get blue Ferraris. And probably you're scratching your head saying, why would you want a blue Ferrari? But it's an example, what can I say? Blue Ferrari. And so with that blue Ferrari, the cars arrive at your dock, and they're all red. They're nice. They're all the fastest version available out there. But we've ordered blue, and it's your responsibility to make sure that we get blue Ferraris and not red Ferraris, because that's what the government has specified in this ridiculous example. So you need to make sure that you have that down, even though you may want a red Ferrari. I think I want a red Ferrari. So, things for a COR to consider. And these are the questions you need to ask yourself as you're doing your walk-around inspections, your inspections of perhaps supplies that are coming along under your contract, or the services. How well is the contractor doing? Are they eking along? Are they just hitting it out of the ballpark every single time? Those are the question. That's the question you want to ask yourself. The next question is whether performance, quality, schedule, and cost requirements are being met. Really important on a cost type contract, and there's many cost type contracts in the various offices that I'm speaking to today. So you want to make sure that all of those things are being met. And you know that as things go up and down, if you spend more cost, perhaps you can make the schedule go faster as well. What you're looking for not is so much to crash the schedule, to make sure that they're complying with the baseline requirements of the contract in all those various areas, and that none of them are failing. You know, we got all the red Ferraris to you, but the quality wasn't there because we got red Ferraris and not blue Ferraris. So it's a question that we need to ask as a COR. We need to ask whether the requiring activity is satisfied. You may be a COR and some other user is using your service, the service under the contract. So ask yourself whether they're satisfied with what's going on. And it's simple as walking up to a program manager within that requirements office, or to the head, the colonel, the general, whoever it happens to be, and ask, are we doing okay with this contract? Do you have any concerns? And so that's a way that you can see how things are going. And of course, if they're not satisfied, it may be unreasonable that they're not satisfied, because that's the way the contract is, and then you as the COR need to sort through that. But if it's reasonable, if they're unsatisfied, then you as the COR need to go and talk to the contract officer and take some action. You need to ask yourself where the processes are working. I worked with a contract at the Presidio of Monterey back in the day, and basically the contractor was giving test items, language test items, to the government, and then the government was to review them and then get back to the contractor any changes that needed to be made, any comments. And what we found was that the contractor was failing miserably on schedule. But looking further into it, the government was way behind in analyzing the testing items. So the processes were actually broken. And so the contracting officer got involved, and the processes to get the throughput of these testing items was increased, so that we could be successfully meeting the schedule of the contract. So are the processes working? And we need to ask that question. And then to follow on, if and where improvements are necessary. And you always want to be thinking about those COR, what are the improvements? Because that may not impact this contract, but it may impact the follow-on contract. So keep a little notes of things that you'd like to have changed as you're watching this contract as the COR, so that we can improve it next time, and so that the contractors can bid to that improvement next time. So that's something to consider. Key assessment factors, and we've kind of talked about this, and these key assessment factors actually tie directly to the CPars sections, pretty one-to-one. Cost control is one thing you want to think about. How's their cost control? Are they getting it on time, but it's always overrun as far as the cost goes? Something to consider, something to write down. How about timeliness? Is it being delivered on time, or are they always late with the procedurals? Are they always late with the reports? Are they always late with the products that they're supposed to be doing, or the upgrades? What's the quality? We talked about the blue Ferrari. Business relationships, are they professional? And I tend to get involved in this a lot as the contracting officer because, I say, gosh, we're not getting proper billing. We're not getting timely billing. Well, how do they respond to that? I mean, they want to get paid, but we also need to be on top of it so we don't have this weird, outrageous bill at the end of the year where we may or may not have funds left. So we want to make sure that we're on top of that, and we want to see, as contracting professionals, are they professional as well? All right, so quality, business relationships, management of key personnel, how are they doing with that? Are their key personnel the scientists, the special folks that they have on their contract? Are they happy? Are they doing what they need to be doing? Are they always looking for new work? You want to look at that as well and see whether they have satisfaction of their key personnel and whether their key personnel are doing what they're supposed to be doing. I also have user satisfaction here. Again, that gets back to, is the end user happy with the contract? And so you want to definitely assess that. And the final thing is something I think maybe perhaps many of us fail to do as CORs or even contracting officers to consider. Are they in compliance with the various rules and regulations? And I've just written down a few of them. OSHA, are they safe in the workforce? Are they doing things to cut corners so that they can get the job done? EPA, Department of Labor regulations, and local standards. Right now, in our world, if the local standard here in San Antonio is that they have to wear masks when they're around other people, and yet you see your contractors walking around the building without masks, that would be an issue, right? You'd have to go ahead and of course, step in as the COR and say, you're required under local ordinance to have masks and perform your work that way. So those are all some of the key assessment factors that you as the COR have to consider on a regular basis. And we'll talk in a minute about what that regular basis looks like for your contract. So there are 3 types of assessment tools that I have listed here that we can give some feedback to the contractor about how well they are doing on your contract and in your workplace. The first one I have listed here is the PAR, the Performance Assessment Report. Now, the Performance Assessment Report, the monthly surveillance, for those who are doing it monthly, comes in all kinds of different flavors. And here's where I say, go to your contracting officer and see what he or she wants for the surveillance. They may want a very extensive form, and that would probably mirror a very extensive contract, or they may want a very simple form. In SPM, they actually have a template that you can use to go ahead and do monthly assessments. I haven't mandated that form as of yet here in our command, but that's an option for you as well. But I know there's some good forms out there that will actually give you exactly what you need. And as part of that PAR, you may actually have developed, or the contracting officer has developed, some checklists. And so let's just say that you're doing the janitorial contract again. Well, you may take a checklist with you, because you're gonna look at the bathrooms every Tuesday and Thursday. And let's just say that's what you're doing. I'm not saying you have to do that, but that's an example. And you're going to bring a checklist in there, and you're going to say floor swept, and you're going to check that off the box. You're going to say toilets cleaned, trash was picked up, and sinks wiped down. Something very, perhaps basic, or perhaps something a lot more extensive. But you're going to do all those things with a checklist. And then that checklist then becomes the basis for your monthly report about how well they're doing. And it gives you some objective data, because you can say, I went into the bathrooms 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times this month, and 2 out of the 8 times the contractor failed to meet the requirement. And so now we have some hard objective facts that we can support our report. And I'm a big advocate of it. If you have a problem, of course you're talking to your contracting officer, but you're also talking to your contractor, and you're saying, hey, I surveilled this is what I found. Can you change this for me? Can you fix this for me? Because you're required to fix this for me. Otherwise, we need to ratchet it up, and there's the remedies that the contracting officer has to fix performance that isn't meeting the standard. The next type of assessment tool I have on here is CPars, and I'm pretty sure that you're all aware of CPars and what it does. There's certain thresholds for certain types of contracts. If you're above that threshold, you're required to go ahead and put an annual evaluation into the CPars system. And the CPars system is nothing more than just a roll-up, if you will, of all your PARs, your monthly assessments. There should never be anything on your CPars which is different than what's on your monthly PARs, because we don't want to surprise the contractor, and the contractor needs to know as soon as possible so he or she can fix the problem. It never works for me to wait till the end of the CPars and say these guys are crumbs because they never emptied the trash. If I was the contractor, I would come back to you as the COR and the contracting officer and say, when did you tell me that I didn't have the trash emptied? Yes, I should have known to do it, but you never told me, and I had this one employee who I guess was sleeping in the back room and just didn't empty the trash ever. This is an opportunity. The CPAR is a roll-up of everything else, so it should never be a surprise when they receive that form saying, please sign off on the CPARs. This is your annual assessment. While I'm on this topic of CPARs, let me talk about grade inflation. And I'm a big, grade inflation is nothing more than we give them higher grades than they deserve. And it's a rating scale, I believe, of 5 in the CPARs, 2 higher, 2 lower, and 1 middle. And that middle rating simply says they have met the requirements of the contract in that section of the CPARs that you're working on. And to do anything above that requires justification. Why are they super-de-duper? And that isn't one of the terms, but why are they super-de-duper? And this is what you'll see with these CPARs. You'll send them out and they'll come back and say, well, you know, we were always excellent or most excellent in this area before, and you've just given me average. Okay. Well, again, grade inflation would say we want to keep it at the level it is. As a contracting officer, if I see that we have an average score, I know they've met the requirement of the contract. That's probably a good contractor to go along with. But we will get those calls back and say, well, why didn't I get something higher? And my typical response was, what did you do beyond the requirement of the contract to get something higher than that? And, you know, for example, this past year we had a flood down in one of the locations down in Florida. A hurricane, I think, blew in, and the contractor, you know, like swam down the street and pulled the servers up on his shoulders and carried them out. Pretty heroic effort. That may not be exactly what happened, but that's, you know, kind of the gist of it. I mean, they went above and beyond to keep the operation going. In my book, there we go, we justified it fully, and they exhibited exemplary behavior in that certain situation, which gave their rating a much higher position than if that event wouldn't have happened. That just showed their dedication. So again, watch out for grade inflation there. Make sure that you're not rating them too high. And if you look at the CPars form off to the right, when you get into any one of the 6 sections, there will be a description of what each one of the ratings means. And so just go ahead and rate according to what the definitions mean. And don't feel the need to jack up your ratings, because we want to, you know, show exactly what they're doing. All right. With that said, I do have one more type of assessment tool, and that's your performance deficiency report. And maybe we don't think of it as a performance tool, but it really is, because we've come to some fork in the road, and as Yogi Berra said, when you come to a fork in the road, take it. And at this fork in the road, we see that you know, the contractor has not done corrective action to bring it into compliance. And so a contract deficiency report spells out exactly what the standard is, and that tells what the government expects to go ahead and meet that requirement. And then the contractor comes back to us and tells us how they're going to fix it. And of course, if they don't, if they choose not to, the contracting officer has some tools in his or her toolbox that we can go ahead and perhaps even terminate the contractor because they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. So let's talk about the common inspection methods that you see as a contracting officer's representative. And I see these kind of mixed and matched and not used exactly correctly. And so let's just spend a few minutes on each one of them. I will say if you're using the standard QASP form, there is a definition of each one of these and even a few more methods that you can use. And so if you're saying, am I using random sampling? Look up in the definitions and see if you are or aren't. And again, a QASP, as I said earlier at the top of the show, is a living document. There is no need for us to do a modification if we want to make a change to the QASP. If we find that you as the COR, that surveillance schedule is too frequent or too lax to do your job to assess whether we're getting the goods or services from the contractor. So go ahead and look at your QASP and find out whether the methods, which we're going to discuss right here, the methods actually are what you're using and whether they make sense to you. Because you can certainly get into a contract and find out that what you were doing or what you thought you were going to be doing doesn't work at all. And if it doesn't, let's just change it. Let's make it right so that we have the proper documentation and the proper things happen. So we have common inspection methods. And the first one is random sampling. And we typically see random sampling when the number of instances is large, allowing for statistically valid sampling to be obtained. So you have a lot of events. You just don't have time as the COR to look at all the events. If we had on base, if you were the COR for watching the janitorial contract on base, like JBSA Lackland, I don't know how many bathrooms we have on base. 200, 1,000, I don't know. But it would just be an impossible task, wouldn't it be, for a COR to go around and look at each one of those bathrooms. What makes sense, though, is perhaps some random sampling. I'm going to sample 30% of the bathrooms each month to see how we're doing. And that would truly be random. And I see this a lot in QASPs. People saying they're going to do random sampling. Random sampling is, when you hear random sampling, you're thinking of a random number generator. It's some truly random number which is telling you what event to go check out. In our case, we may have, let's say we had a simple case, we had 5 bathrooms. Our random number generator may say you're going to go look at 1, 2, and 5. And you go look at 1, 2, and 5, and that's representative, if the math is done correctly, of all the bathrooms across the base. And then every bathroom would have an equal chance of being looked at over time. And so you want to look at that as well. So if you see random sampling on your QASP, you may want to ask yourself, am I really doing random sampling? Is there some number generator? And that's why I ask people when I see that coming in, QASP coming in to me for review, I say, okay, so what generator are you using? Well, we're not using a generator, Todd. We're just going to, when we feel like it, go out there and do it. No, random sampling means you're going to have this mathematical scheme to go ahead and make sure that government is getting the goods or services that they require. The second method that I see a lot of, and actually this makes sense in many, many cases, it's 100% inspection. And that simply says you as the COR are going to inspect 100% of whatever the contractor is turning in. This is typically for high, for services that impact health and safety. And so with that said, if someone's going to die because you didn't inspect the radon tank that was returned back to your flight, well, that's going to be 100%. You want to make sure that's correct every single time. I don't even know if radon comes in tanks. It probably doesn't. But that's 100% inspection. But it's used for health and safety. Or it can also be used if the number of incidences is small. And so let's say we only have one report given once a month. My guess is that, and it's really important. It's really important that we know exactly what they did in that month. They traced, the base lines on the roads, the painted lines on the roads. Every month they're tracking out there how well the paint is weathering. Something really high tech like that. Well, and they're going to give us one report a month, and month one says, oh yeah, the paint lines are at 99%, and month 2 is at 78%, and month 3 is 50%, whatever the numbers happen to be. But it's a simple enough thing that we can go ahead and do a 100% inspection and make sure that those are actually going to be okay. So that's 100% inspection. Now, if you're not doing random sampling and you're not doing 100%, you're probably doing periodic. And this is what I really see happening the most on most of our contracts here at JBSA, periodic sampling. And that's when it's not A or B. And that may be something as simple as, you know what, we're going to inspect every Tuesday and Thursday. Okay, you've done some periodic inspection, you've called it out, but there isn't a random number behind which facilities are being used. You're just going to every Tuesday and Thursday go out there in the field and check the bathrooms and make sure that the janitorial services are being done. And the final common inspection method that we have available to us is user feedback. And I just got to think food service, if you are a COR for a food service contract, this is maybe the #1 thing that you use, right? You have comment cards right by the line as you're going into a FAC. And food, I'm not sure I got that right, so someone's going to tell me that it's not a FAC. Because I'm mixing my Army up with my Air Force. Anyway, food facility. Right? You're going to have your card there that's going to be a pull out and say, you know, customer service is good, tables are clean, floors were swept, the food was hot. Okay, well you have feedback cards, and you can use that every month. You also have, you get that phone call from the general saying, hey, my troops weren't fed today. That's another type of feedback that none of us like to get, but that definitely happens a lot. So those are the inspection methods, the common inspection methods. Let me give you another word. I think we'll give you another word. The first word was Nike. The second word is swim. Swim. All right. So documenting contractor performance. And this is maybe sort of the meat that I want to talk to y'all about today, because what I see is, well, let me tell you what these things are, and we'll go from there. Documenting contractor performance. Comments should be, and there's a list here, submitted regularly. Okay. And I tend to tell my people, so let's say it's the month of June, I really do expect to see your comments shortly after the 15th of the next month. That gives you enough time to collect your data, it gives you enough time to figure out whether they did a good job or a bad job, and then turn in your PAR. Okay, so you want to do that regularly. I do not like it. I sound like Dr. Seuss, I think, don't I? I do not like it, Sam I am. I do not like it when you turn in 4 or 5 PARs at the same time. Now maybe you're young and nimble and you remember everything about everything, but I'm older and I forget things, quite frankly, and it behooves me to go ahead and write down things right away when they happen. I think that principle should go across our entire quality system. We need to go ahead and put down things on the paper as soon as we possibly can, so we closely can say what happened that month, because things do change right in our minds as time goes on. So we want to make sure that we are doing it right away. Comments should be contractually based and professional. Man, I had a COR one time who just wanted to rip the contractor just up one side and down the other. And actually in his comments, he was calling them all kinds of names. No, we need to be contractually based and professional, because I guarantee you, when we go to court as a contracting officer, and you too, because I'm going to bring you into court with me, because I need my friend with me, the COR. When you come to court, they're going to say, did you have conflicts with the contractor? Well, no, we were all good. And then they pull out your PAR, which said, these people are evil, despicable folks. That's going to be used in court to determine the amount of claim that we're going to go ahead and pay them. So make sure that you keep your comments professional and contractually based. If the contract says you're going to empty the garbage cans every Tuesdays and Thursdays, that's what your comments have to say. We're going to empty the trash can every Tuesday and Thursday. And we're not going to say they didn't empty the trash cans on Wednesday, because that's not what the contract says. And that would be a new requirement based on my scenario. Comments should be applicable to the month reporting period. So yeah, so we don't want to write something up in June that happened back in January. Your comments need to be along the same period of time. They have to be performance based. You need to talk about the performance that wasn't done and nothing else. They need to be specific, fully detailed, and standalone. I should be able to pick up one of your PARs, look at it, and say, I understand what happened here. The contractor failed to do trash dumping on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I went in at 5 p.m. on Tuesday, and there was trash on the floor and the can was full. That comment stands alone, and I'm able to go ahead and discuss that further with a contractor. Your comments should be based on information gathered during audits and from feedback. I'm not sure what else you base your information on, but you definitely want to make sure that you have some ability to support what you're saying. And of course, they'll be supported by your checklist comments if you're using a checklist, which makes sense. That just becomes your backup document. So you've made these wonderful comments on this piece of paper or electronically. What do you do with it? We definitely need to file everything. And I think most of you know this already, so I'm not going to belabor the point, but if you're, and you know who you're talking about, if you're in another situation and you're not in PI, then you have your own set of systems to go ahead and take care of this, but the principles are the same. You need to be filing on a regular basis, whether that's weekly, monthly, quarterly, biannually, whatever your surveillance schedule is, you need to be putting those into PI SPM, because that's the official place that those reside. Again, so that we have issues, we can go back and refer to them and use those as evidence to support whatever action the contracting officer has to take with them. So PI SPM is where we store all of our surveillance reports, and we get those in there on a regular basis, whatever that regular basis is. And then CPars, we also store the reports that we make and create in CPars. I want to really bring this up because I saw this just recently. Someone actually printed out from CPars the report and had sent it to someone for review. And the CPars reports need to stay in CPars. Those are a close hold, so don't be taking those out of CPars. Now let's say you say, well, gosh, I want my boss to review what I did. Let's just say that's what it was. If that's the case, talk to your CPars focal point and perhaps have that boss added in the chain so that he or she can review as well the comments that you've made. But let's keep it in CPars. And the other comment I have for CPars, and you all know this, that work at JBSA Lackland, the clock is ticking on CPars, and there's not a QAPC out there that isn't saying the same thing. We only have so many days to get those rated by your assessing official over to the contractor and then adjudicated if there's an issue. And so it really does behoove us to go ahead and get those out and done as soon as possible once we know what the rating should be for those annuals. So stay on top of those. Do yourself a favor. Give your QAPC a break and just get those turned in as soon as possible so we can get those off the dockets. So let's close then with some highlights. You're going to get a point out of this if you've an hour's worth of credit if you stuck through this. So congratulations on that. Here's Todd's do's and don'ts, and they're in no particular order. I just thought I'd throw them out there. The first one is do inspections per the QASP. If it isn't working, revise it. So the QASP is a living document, and make sure that you have your QASP on and you're actually doing the inspections per your QASP. Okay. My second do write-ups timely. More time that passes, the more forgetful we can become. At least us older folks can become. Do contact your CO as soon as you have an issue. And again, I just can't emphasize this enough. Please, 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 please do your contracting officer a favor. Let her know, let him know as soon as you have a problem. Problems do not get better over time. If you think it's a problem, it might be a problem, talk to your contracting officer. He or she will know whether it's a problem or not, whether action needs to be taken. Get that monkey off of your back and give it to the contracting officer. Right? Let them deal with the baby issue that's going to be out there. But do it timely. Again, as a contracting officer, you just never want to know 6 months later that something happened and you weren't told about it. It just hurts our ability to perhaps get some cash back on the contract or to get some other consideration. We don't know until we know what's going on. So please, as a COR, you're not bothering the contracting officer. Let them know, and then, like I said, she or he can go ahead and make a decision what direction we're going to go from there. And the last do that I have for you is do have a copy of your latest contract revision in your folder, on your desktop, wherever that you can see it. Do not get stuck behind. And frankly, CORs, contracting officers get busy, don't they? Just like you do. With different things, they're running multiple contracts. Make sure that you have the latest version of the contract. And it's just a simple phone call, it's a simple email to your contracting officer, and just make sure that you're at the latest version so that you're surveilling the right contract for the contracting officer as a representative. So let's talk about some don'ts. And I tried to get cute here and rhyme things, so let's see if I succeeded. Don't inflate. All right, so don't inflate the grades. You're in CPars or you're turning in your PAR. If they're doing the minimum amount of work which is required in the contract, they're average. Give them that average rating. Don't inflate the grades. Oh, don't wait. Don't inflate, don't wait. See what I did there? They're rhyming. Don't wait. Tell the CO there's a problem. And I've already beat that horse to death, so I'm not going to do that. Don't procrastinate. Don't put it off. As soon as you know what the ratings are for that month or for that year, please, please, please write them down, get them out there. And finally, don't pontificate. So I have inflate, wait, procrastinate, and pontificate. Stick to the facts in your review. Stick to the facts. Make sure that in doing that, you're taking your personal comments out. All you're doing is just saying, this is what the contract said to do, and this is what they're doing or not doing. Keep it simple, but give enough detail so that a law judge could pick up that piece of paper and say, I understand what you're saying here. I understand that we told them to do this, and they were doing this instead. And now we have a basis to go ahead and make an award or deny an award for a claim. So in conclusion then, let me just say, hey, thank you all for all you do as CORs, whether you're on my base or one of the others who happens to be listening to this. I know that you're all doing other jobs out there that are important to the government, and being a COR is perhaps a thankless job, but I just want to say thank you, because you make sure the government gets the goods and services that it's required. Document, document, document. That's what my first contracting officer told me when I was a young pup coming up in contracting, and I'll say the same thing to you. Document, document, document. Have records about conversations you've had with your contractor. Have all the documents for your evaluations. Have them handy so that you can pull on them if you need to. Practice good communication with your contractor and your contracting officer. Back in the old days, we used to hold things close, and it was just the government. But I'm actually okay talking to your contractor and saying, I got these concerns as a COR, because that dialogue will help make sure that we are getting the goods and services that require. So finally, stay safe, remain vigilant, and the final word for you is Google. It's goggles. So it's goggles. That's the third word that you're going to give it. Maybe it's spelled like Google. That's why I got it all confused. But that would be your third word. So go ahead, send those to me, todd.bales@us.af.mil, and I will see you next time. Have a great day. Cheers.